Our adopted son abandoned us to live with his bio parents, vanished for 10 years, and returned only to demand money, but we said no, and it backfired. I'm a 60-year-old retired engineer, living with my wife, Laura, in a quiet town in Oregon. We spent most of our lives working hard, building a home filled with love and warmth, and dreaming of raising a family. When it became clear that children wouldn't come naturally, we turned to adoption. It was a long, emotionally draining process, but after nearly 3 years, we brought home our son, Ethan. He was barely 3 months old. From the moment we held him in our arms, he became the center of our world. We threw ourselves into parenthood. His first laugh, his first steps, his first day at school, we were there for every moment. We cheered from the sidelines at his soccer games, helped him build elaborate school projects, and spent weekends hiking the local trails. He was curious, especially about how things worked. He'd take apart radios and clocks just to understand them, and I loved that about him. As he grew, so did our bond, or so we believed. We made it a point to be honest with him from an early age about his adoption. Laura and I wanted him to grow up secure in the knowledge that he was wanted and loved, no matter where he came from. We explained that his biological parents existed, but that they hadn't been in a position to raise him. We thought we handled it with sensitivity, leaving the door open for him to explore his origins if he ever felt the need. When Ethan turned 16, his curiosity about his biological parents became more intense. We answered his questions as best we could, even offered to help him search if he wanted. At the time, I thought this was a healthy, normal part of his development. I figured he just needed some answers, maybe a little closure. But when he turned 18, things shifted. He found them, his biological parents. We never got the full story about how he tracked them down. At first, Laura and I were optimistic. We thought meeting them would bring him peace. Maybe he'd understand his roots better, and then return to us, having closed that chapter. Instead, he became distant. His warmth toward us cooled, and there was a sharpness in his tone when he spoke. He accused us of lying to him his whole life, convinced we had kept him from them deliberately. We were stunned. We'd always been upfront. There had never been secrets. But in his mind, we had stolen his identity, his true family. The day he left is burned in my memory. He stood in the doorway with his bags packed, announcing that he was moving in with his biological parents. He said they understood him in a way we never could. Laura cried. I pleaded with him to stay in touch. But he was already gone, slamming the door on nearly 2 decades of family life. We called. We texted. We sent emails and letters. He never responded. Months passed, then years. We heard scattered news from mutual acquaintances. He had moved to California, was living with his biological family, had gotten a job somewhere, but nothing directly from him. Laura sank into a quiet sadness, always wondering if we'd done something wrong. I threw myself into my work back then, the only distraction I had from the ache. That silence lasted almost 10 years. Then, earlier this year, Ethan called. Just hearing his voice after so long sent a shock through me. He sounded casual, as if nothing had happened. He said he missed us, wanted to visit, catch up. Laura and I clung to a sliver of hope. Maybe he'd grown up. Maybe he wanted to rebuild what we had lost. We invited him to visit one weekend. He arrived taller, older, but unmistakably Ethan. Yet something about him was different. His eyes scanned the living room, lingering on old photos, but there was no warmth there. He made polite conversation for a few minutes before getting to the real reason for his visit. He was in trouble and needed money. He talked about debts, job losses, and how his biological parents were no longer able to help him. His words were vague, lacking specifics, but his message was clear. He needed a bailout, and he believed it was something we owed him. I wanted to believe he was sincere, but after a decade of silence, it was hard. Laura and I exchanged a glance, both sensing something was wrong. He spoke of us as if we were still his safety net, as if the years he'd spent ignoring our existence didn't matter. We told him we'd need time to think. He pressed harder. His situation was urgent, he said. He needed help immediately. But he still didn't offer any real answers about where he'd been or why he had cut us off for so long. His tone was entitled, impatient. When we explained that we weren't comfortable giving him money under these circumstances, his expression hardened. He accused us of turning our backs on him. He left abruptly, angry, slamming the door behind him like he had 10 years before. A few days later, it started. Ethan took his grievances online. He posted long emotional accusations on social media, claiming we had abandoned him, that we had never truly loved him, that we were sitting on wealth we refused to share with our own son. He tagged extended family members, old family friends, anyone who might listen. Some people reached out to us, confused or critical. Others offered support, knowing there was more to the story. We tried to stay composed, but the stress weighed heavily on Laura. She barely slept, worrying about what people would believe. Ethan's campaign escalated. He painted himself as a victim, and us as cruel, heartless parents. It was painful, not just because of what he said, but because of who was saying it, our son. The boy we had raised, loved, and hoped for. I decided to confront him directly. I sent him a message asking to talk, to resolve things privately. His response was cold. He told me to keep the money, but threatened to keep telling the world the truth about how we treated him. Laura and I contacted a lawyer. We didn't want to sue him, but we needed to protect ourselves. We gathered everything, proof of our attempts to reach him over the years, screenshots of his demands for money, his public posts. The attorney advised us to document everything and to issue a brief, factual statement if necessary. At first, Laura was hesitant. She didn't want to drag this into a public battle, but the pressure was mounting. Ethan wasn't stopping, and people were starting to ask questions. So we wrote a short post on our personal accounts. We explained that we loved our son, had reached out many times over the years, and that he had only returned recently asking for financial support without addressing the past. We ended by saying we remained open to a real reconciliation, but not under the threat of manipulation. That post shifted things. People began to question Ethan's version of events. Some pointed out that he had cut us off, only returning when he needed money. Others asked why he was seeking help from parents he claimed were so terrible. The tide turned. Ethan grew more erratic in his posts. His stories didn't add up. Friends and family who once sympathized began stepping back. Eventually, his biological parents reached out to us. They were polite, even apologetic. They admitted that encouraging Ethan to leave us had been a mistake, one they regretted. They explained that he had become resentful over time when they couldn't give him the life he expected. Their words didn't heal the damage, but they gave us some peace. At least they saw the truth. Then Ethan made one last attempt. He posted a long message filled with lies, claims that we had abused him emotionally, withheld money he was entitled to, and never supported him. He threatened to go to the media unless we paid him. This was no longer about family. It was blackmail. Our lawyers sent a cease and desist letter, warning him to stop spreading falsehoods, or we'd take legal action. We didn't have to follow through. His credibility was already collapsing. People were openly challenging him, demanding proof he couldn't provide. He deleted several of his posts. Eventually, the storm died down. He lost the audience he thought he controlled. We never paid him a dime. In the end, we realized we'd lost Ethan long ago. The boy we raised was gone. If he ever came back with a genuine apology, ready to rebuild trust, we'd listen. But we wouldn't be manipulated again. That chapter closed quietly. Laura and I moved on, holding our heads high. We stood by the life we built, knowing we did our best. And in the silence that followed, we found peace again. If you found this story meaningful, subscribe to the channel for more real-life experiences and reflections.